Pulling the Trigger is sponsored by Easy Vape North Shore, the industry's leading direct retailer of the highest quality personal vaporizers, e-cigs, vapes, and Canadian-made e-juice. Located at 987 Marine Drive in North Vancouver, or you can check them out online at www.easyvapecanada.com. You can also donate to our Patreon account. Patreon is a membership platform that makes it easy for artists and creators to connect with their fans and get paid. That's at www.patreon.com/MarkHughesComic. And please like our Facebook page at facebook.com/PTG604. Welcome to Pulling the Trigger. I am Mark Hughes, and this is my podcast. Once again, produced, posted, edited, and curated by Taylor Murray, who also runs a podcast called The Taylor Murray Show. As always, Pulling the Trigger is sponsored by our friends at Jackal Events. Jackal Events is a Vancouver-based event organization company specializing in political events and comedy shows. And they have a comedy show coming up Saturday, March 31st. Danny Polishuk, live in Vancouver. That will be at the Rickshaw Theatre, which is 254 East Hastings, Vancouver, BC. And tickets are available at www.picatic.com. That's PICATIC.com. Well, what's the date today? Today is Valentine's Day. Boo, boo, who cares? Whatever. Love it if you like it. Don't like it if you don't love it. You do you, bae. I have a Valentine's Day show tonight at a Scandinavian hall. It's a dinner and all that kind of stuff. I'm amazed when I'm hired to do shit like this. We'll see how it goes. I'll report back. What's going on for me? I'll be in Calgary next week. That's February 18th to 25th. I'll be doing a bunch of shows. Mostly open mics. I'm going there to do some writing and stuff like that. So, that's the main focus. Be there for a few days. Toronto was fun. Had a good time there. It's really looking like I'm going to be moving there. It just fits what I do more. The city is just I feel more at home there than I do even in Vancouver. I don't want to move just because moving's a pain in the ass, like everyone. But just when I go there, I like the blue collar vibe of all the cities that aren't Vancouver. Vancouver's got this kind of like smug hippie, pseudo-hippie, pseudo-leftist kind of, we all have degrees, and this isn't everyone, but it's enough where it's just irritating sometimes. And I know there's people like that in other cities. There's lots of like that in Toronto, but there's enough people who aren't like that in Toronto that just it just resonates more with me. So there, fuck it. Fuck your beaches and mountains and all that hiking and all that shit, Vancouver. I'm gonna go to the gross, disgusting big smoke of Toronto. I notice Toronto doesn't give a shit when people make fun of them either. They're just like, yeah, we're busy doing shit. Yeah, go ahead. You can call us shitty all you want. We're getting shit done. I like it. I like the work ethic out there, which is funny because I'm fucking lazy as hell. Got my first, not quite a death threat, but more like a death wish. A wishing of death from someone regarding this podcast. Someone messaged me on Facebook yesterday. They'd read the article about Kyle, episode 4, Kyle the drug dealer. And, the person was a grieving relative of someone who died from opioid overdose. So I'm not too mad about it. I get the outrage. But, like, there are people in the city right now. If you really wanted to, you could go and do a reverse sting and buy some fentanyl off someone on the downtown east side. It's not hard to find. This person was mad at me and said I should turn Kyle into the police, and I'm not going to do that. And like, let's just legal bare bones here. I've never seen him in possession of drugs, and I've never seen him sell drugs. In the beginning of that episode, I even said I don't know for sure that he did do all that. So legally, he was a guy who claimed something that I had on the podcast. Also, people assume I know him. Maybe I don't know him. Maybe I don't know who he actually is. Maybe I do, but maybe I don't. Maybe we kept it completely anonymous that way it could never come up where I'd be forced to have to reveal who he is. You don't know, but I'm not going to do it anyway. And I stand by interviewing, and I stand by the person's right to be extremely pained by me interviewing someone like that and be outraged and be mad at me. I stand by that, but I also stand by me interviewing them. I think that's a perspective that a lot of people need to hear. A lot of the people who are selling the shit in this city are doing it to support their own habits, so do we round them up? A lot of the people who've died of fentanyl overdose sold fentanyl too. So where does it start? Where does it stop, right? One of the reasons I do this podcast is because I'm interested in certain perspectives, and I know other people are as well. So why don't we learn a bit? And yeah, you can still reserve the right to hate me, even send me fucking hate mail and death threats or whatever. I hope you don't actually kill me. I mean, I got some shit I gotta do. My ferrets need to be fed, but like, I'm going to keep doing it. And I have some fucking controversial guests coming up that other people are going to get mad at. I'm probably going to get threatened over. I'm probably going to lose friends over some of the guests that I have on this podcast. So buckle up, everybody. Hopefully that wasn't too loud, what I just did there. Our next guest for this week's episode, which will be released on February 15th, is a man I met by accident on the UBC Free Speech Club. I was asking for certain type of guest, and he popped up, and we got talking. Turns out we knew mutual people, and his name is Nathaniel Christopher. Nathaniel is a former journalist for Xtra magazine, or newspaper, which is a LGBTQ newspaper, and he has had an interesting life himself. I'll let him tell you more about it, but one of the things I like about Nathaniel is I can have just a legit... We get along so well, and it's just... when I was interviewing, so the interview you're about to hear is the first time I ever met him, and we were getting along right away. And we have a lot in common, some trauma stuff, some growing up in the system stuff, and one of the things I do notice is when you've come from that life and you've grown up in the system, you do see society and life differently, and other people who didn't do that can't see that. You know things aren't always as nice and pleasant. And you know people who are like bleeding hearts and activists, while they may have their heart in the right place, which a lot of them don't, they don't realize what life is really like and how disposable people can be. It's just a hard reality. And so sometimes we just go, we take a fucking sense, we joke about it, we're seemingly callous about it, but when you grow up in those systems, or you've had a lot of contact with them, it really brings you face to face with how powerless as an individual human being you really can be. And how much society at the end of the day, as a whole, as a group, doesn't give a fuck about you. But that's life, and no one owes me anything. And I think Nathaniel would agree with me. Cool. So, on that bright note, let's meet Nathaniel Christopher. Cookies, rainbow cookies, huh?
Yeah.
Where'd you get them from?
The Valley Bakery here on Hastings Street in Burnaby. They've been around for about 50 some odd years, and they use good ingredients.
I'm going to try one. I lied. I'm going to try a rainbow one.
Yeah.
Remember, you're going to try and convert me, so.
Yeah, you'll be sucking cock by the end of this. Not mine.
I don't need a cookie to do that.
No, not mine, no.
So how's your day so far?
My day has been good. I had a school day today, and I got up at 7 and did 2 classes and 4 hours of law. So,
what are you taking in school?
I'm taking Legal Administrative Assistant Studies at Douglas College. It's a 1-year certificate program, and I've just began my second semester, and last semester actually, on Wednesday, and so today's Friday, so I've done the first week already.
And this is your, second semester?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, good time to introduce you. Welcome to Pulling the Trigger. I'm Mark Hughes, your host, as usual, and we're here with Nathaniel Christopher, and I'm meeting him for the first time, too. So we're all getting to know Nathaniel. Is it Nathaniel?
You're right. Yes.
Nate, not Nathaniel?
No, I've always hung on to the full 9 letters.
Okay.
When I was about 4, my grandmother said, we should just call you Nathan. Wouldn't you like that? And I just remember screaming, no! And my mother actually went to bat for me and said, well, it's his name. That's what he's called. And there you have it. I've always gone by Nathaniel.
Okay, well, Nathaniel Christopher. And Nathaniel and I met, in quotations, virtually, via the UBC Free Speech Club. I was posted in the club looking for Well, I was looking for someone. I don't want to blow my wad on that potential guest. I was looking for someone who could be a potentially controversial guest, and I thought someone in the UBC Free Speech Club might know where to direct me, and you directed me.
Oh, yes.
As it turns out, one of the main guest type that I was looking for didn't pan out. Then you directed me to another guy who I'm going to be interviewing on Sunday. And Bill. I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'll save that for the episode.
Yeah.
And then we became Facebook friends. And then through some, the banter that happens on Facebook, I was like, hey, this guy's pretty neat too.
Thank you.
Yeah. So why don't we start off with what I do know about you and why I wanted to interview you. You used to be a journalist?
Yes, I worked as a journalist from, well, I say I did. I began working in newspapers, at least when I was 16 years old in Nanaimo, so in 1998. And I continued working in sort of a journalistic capacity until January 2017. So that's about 20 years.
Wow.
And it was always it was the only thing I ever wanted to do. It was sort of what I considered myself to be, a journalist. It was just so second nature and so central to how I identified, I suppose, in this life.
Right. And what I found interesting, the thing that twigged me to you is you're a gay man?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you used to work for a periodical. What was the name of it?
Xtra.
Yeah. Is it based out of Toronto?
Yeah, and they had at one point print editions in Toronto.
Were you living in Toronto?
No, sir. I did live in Ontario, but that's for my university. No, I started writing for Xtra in their Vancouver office when it was called Xtra West. In 2005, the same time I actually moved into this very apartment. It was I'd finished university, and I had worked on the campus papers at Trent University, where I did my undergrad. My degree's right there.
There is a degree there, people. I'm seeing it. Yeah.
In Canadian studies, by the way. Anyway, you can Google that. Right off the bat, the editor, Robin Perel, just sort of took a real shining to me. She was like, I love your style of writing, and you should write for us, and basically was my mentor in every aspect of not only journalism, but also sort of my values and how I would look at the world as an adult. And I would say it was perhaps the most positive and good relationship I had in terms of a work relationship.
Meaningful.
Very meaningful, yeah. Very meaningful and very uplifting, but this person, she invested like over a decade in working with me, and I'm not always the easiest person to work with, and so I just look back on meeting her and how that was such a positive thing probably one of the most positive things to ever happen in my life.
So, when you're working at a Xtra, what type of a periodical is it?
It has evolved over time, but I would say, as I kind of my contributions to it, it was more of a gay newspaper. So it primarily targeted a gay male and to a lesser extent lesbian audience when it was in the print edition, and West End, Vancouver, East Van to a lesser extent. So news and events that would be relevant to the gay community or the West End, for example. Like, we did a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily gay, but it was very specific to
adjacent.
Yeah, to the quote-unquote gayborhood.
So, okay, now, if it's gay-focused, does that mean there's a bias?
Yeah. Like, Xtra, and it was and it is, it's run by this gay liberation organization. I'm perhaps not describing them as accurately as I could, but they started off in the 60s, I believe. Pink Triangle Press, they're a nonprofit, and they have a stated mission of basically setting love free, allowing men and women to, be gay and have free love and be happy. And there's more than that, but that was our guiding principle, and that was sort of in my that was our stated bias. Like when I would write an article, I'm always writing it with a mind for gay liberation and the advancement of LGBT equality, or LGBT equality, more specifically.
Well, cover any interesting stories and any memorable ones? Oh my
God! Yeah, there's there's so many, but I guess. Maybe the most meaningful one. Most of the stuff I did was news, so I would write the courts, the Human Rights Tribunal, sitting in Supreme Court for weeks on end, getting to know the people behind these famous trials as individuals, getting to know policymakers, for example, and politicians who, in some instances, it was sort of tricky sometimes where I'd be interviewing a politician, and this same politician will have done some pretty drastic cutbacks from when I was aging out of foster care. And it's how can you be such a nice person to deal with, and then you were this evil figure in my earlier life? So there was a lot of surreal shit like that.
Any noteworthy cases that people might know about?
Oh gosh, one that you would know about as a comedian. Did you ever hear about the Lorna Party, Guy Earl?
It's funny, I only know the Guy Earl part because I'm the comedian. Right. So I've never, the victims' names aren't the ones, and it makes sense that the victims or the complainants were the ones that you would know because they're the gay ones, and I would know the comic because I'm the comedian, right?
Oh no, that was actually that one would probably be interesting to your audience because it talks about free speech, and the headlines that we put in there were gay rights versus free speech. Where is that line, and who has to? And I don't know. I was sitting through the tribunal, and I got to know all the people involved, the complainant, not Earl. I only talked to him on the phone. He was not affluent and couldn't be there to defend himself in person. But it was an excellent discussion about, I think, free speech. And my editor finally said in one of her editorials, and it's one I agree with actually, is everyone behaving badly. And the lesbian was successful in her complaint, but is that the avenue that I would have taken? I don't think so. Is that perhaps the best case to describe the importance of the Human Rights Tribunal? I'm not sure. It was a shit show.
Can you? I know this could take up a huge portion of the interview, but a lot of people aren't going to know what we're talking about.
I'm sorry.
Could you? I'll let you describe what the case.
Oh, okay. So about 10 years ago, in 2007, there was this restaurant on the Commercial Drive, Zesties it was called.
It's called Zawa's now.
Zawa. That's a village in the owner's homeland, I believe. Zawa. Anyway, there was a comedian by the name of Guy Earl who was giving his stand-up routine in there. It
was an open mic, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, but he might have had more of a...
He was hosting it.
Yeah, and anyway, I don't want to get too into the technical stuff, but he was giving a stand-up performance, and the lesbians didn't like it, and there was a back and forth, and he said some pretty nasty things to them. I think someone's glasses came off. I think some water was splashed. There was some conflict, and she responded to this by filing a human rights complaint that dragged on for years and years and years, and I got to go to the Human Rights Tribunal and sit in through the whole proceedings and hear everything, and it was fascinating.
And ultimately, the judgment was in her favor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She won.
Oh, yeah. And
remember how much money it was that he had to pay? It was the owner of the restaurant, too.
I think so, yeah. And the owners, I don't know, it's I don't know. It just was a shitty thing for everybody involved, really. I try not to comment on the stories I write, but looking back on it, it doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy feeling at all, and I am very sympathetic. I would say I'm quite passionate about free speech, and does this have a chilling effect on comedians? Does it? I mean, if you've heard about it,
here's how I can speak to it as a comic. It did rattle the comedy community. Mm-hmm. It was divisive too. What you'd be surprised to hear is not a lot of comics believe in free speech.
Really?
I have to fight with them. I have more problems with comedians than I do audience members. I'm the quote-unquote offensive comic of Vancouver, right?
Wow.
I don't like it. I hate that label. I don't want to be. I'm just joking about what I think is funny, and it tends to be stuff that ruffles feathers, right? Mm-hmm. I have more problems with comedians than I do audience, because comics these days tend to be more on the hard, quite liberal. A lot of comics would fit right in on a university campus. Let's put it that way, right?
So they're not funny.
I'm not even going to comment on that part. Some of them yes, some of them no. That doesn't seem to play into it either, whether they're funny or not. Some of the funniest ones are the biggest, people shouldn't be saying certain things, and comedy that they think we're all supposed to be political commentators and stuff like that. Like there's gone are the in their minds, in these some of these comedians' minds, gone are the days of a joke for joke's sake. It's like there always has to be some cutting or poignant social message in your joke, and it's like, fuck off, man. Yeah. I don't, because personally as a comedian, as someone who watches comedy, which is more now that I do comedy, but it's not, when I did watch comedy, I don't want to learn. I'm not there to get a tutorial. I'm not there to get an inspirational message. I just want to laugh at jokes, man. If any of that other stuff happens to be in there, okay, but I'm not going to a TED Talk. You know what I mean? I'm going I want to laugh at dick jokes and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. And personally, my sense of humor has always been one where I like people getting hurt in the joke.
I heard you say that,
and that's my type. And not everyone likes it. That's fine, but that's what I like.
I really like jokes when it's at someone else's expense. Frankly,
yes. And what some comics these days will say is that the only person's expense it should ever be at is punching up, as I hate that fucking term, but anyway, punching up towards power. And it's like, yeah, okay, but then it could turn into this you're preaching, right? Also, Trump jokes are hack as fuck now. They're not funny anymore because everyone agrees with it, right? And I shouldn't say everyone agrees with it, but you know what I mean.
I'm also going to say the same about, and there's a great clip, and I forget who it was, but I wish I could remember, but there was some comedian going on one of these shows, these America Got Talent type shows, and he was just a gay guy bashing, in San Francisco, I think, bashing Christianity. And yeah, it was marginally funny, but there's nothing, for example, risky or transgressive about that. And it's just gets to the point where it's done so much that it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Beating a dead horse.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page with that one. Anyway, so back to the Guy Earl thing. It did have a chilling... I don't know if it had a chilling effect, but one thing I do know, because I started doing comedy a few years after it happened, is that comics are a bit more scared, are a bit more cautious these days, because they do know that could happen. It's more that most comedians, 90% of comics, as it stands in the state of the world as it is with the material that they're doing, are probably never going to run into any of these problems.
It was a great conversation, though, about free speech. And for me, my positive takeaway, speaking of TED Talks, was the really, I would say, high-level discussion about free speech. And I think it almost predicted what would come, that this would be a huge who knew that this would be such a huge battle years down the road, but these guys did. And there was this one comedian in particular, a bit of a tangent here. I wish I could remember his full name. I think his first name was Nick. He was a little guy from, I think, Alberta, blonde hair.
Nick Roy.
Yeah. He just, I don't know if it's impolite to repeat his jokes, but one that always stuck out as really funny and bad was, there was this whole horrible case of women joggers being raped. Yeah. And he said something about how who can run faster than them is the guy who actually catches up and rapes them, or something like that. It was so transgressive, and okay, I'm gonna get in trouble for that on so many different levels.
Well, you might get on trouble. I can't. The thing about my podcast is I really want people to speak their mind and not worry about anything.
No, but I was just, again, I was very impressed by this young man and his...
He gets in trouble for his jokes all the time. He's banned from lots of comedy.
Nice. Yeah. No, and I say that in a good way. He really sticks out in my mind as someone who's fucking hilarious, transgressive, and probably a little bit disturbed in a good way.
Yeah, you could probably say that. But what I was going to say is that, I think, and then there was a case just recently where a guy in Quebec got in trouble for some jokes too, and he had to go to human rights.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Like Ezra Levant?
No.
No.
His name was. I can't remember. I can't believe I can't remember his name. I'm just gonna quickly look this up. I have his album on my phone here.
Nice.
I can't remember the name. My library. Hold on. Let's just keep talking. I don't want to have dead air at all.
No, we don't want dead air. And that was like a long time ago now. It's hard to remember these things, but that was a very...
Mike Ward.
Mike Ward.
Mike Ward.
Hey, he was at the tribunal too, I'm sure of it.
He got taken to the tribunal for a joke, but his was a joke that was done on TV.
But I believe he was actually at the tribunal, and I think he testified. The name does ring a bell. Does he wear glasses?
No. So he ended up getting in trouble later and the tribunal was levied a judgment against him. So he owed a bunch of money because of that. Yeah,
sucks.
So yeah, that's this. So you were a journalist?
Yes.
And one of the things, the main reason, the biggest reason I wanted to talk to you is when you and I were discussing stuff, just having small talk and chitty chat in Facebook Messenger. You told me the reason that you quit journalism. Yeah. You want to tell me what led up to that?
It wasn't a black and white thing that you wake up one day and you're just done. It was sort of an evolution. I felt that over time, I would say in the last year or two of my tenure, it was not... I felt there was this push to drive a narrative as opposed to cover the news. And covering the news, fuck Huffington Post and all these clickbait news aggregate websites that go for the clicks versus the news and information. For actually covering stories over the span of years and decades, it's like you cultivate relationships with people. There's a give and take. You keep in touch with people. You're building relationships and maintaining them. So, for example, when I wrote stories, I got quotes from people that I know, that I called, that I visit. And that meant a lot to me, sort of, telling their stories, sharing their research. I never did editorials or put my opinion forth. I always used my platform to, put forth the stories of others. But again, over the time, it felt like we were instead driving a narrative, looking after going for clicks. And I just was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't go to journalism school for this. This isn't what I want to be known for. It got to the point where I was sort of embarrassed to send the story to the people I was writing about. And, my editor, again, who I have much respect and affection for, I guess her vision didn't necessarily, align with what I was, I had really liked about the whole thing, and that gave me some dignity and some sense of purpose. Because again, working as a freelance journalist, like you talked about your struggles working as a comedian, it's not a lot of money. You don't.
Let's not be too fast and loose with the term work.
Exactly.
As a comedian, yeah. But
so it was very difficult to, it was a very marginal existence, but I got some dignity out of it, some social cachet of saying you're a journalist and access to anyone you want to talk to. It's really cool. I got like cards from cabinet ministers when my cat died. So that was nice.
What would you say the narrative was they were pushing?
Oh God, now you're asking the hard questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, social justice warrior bullshit, basically. Identity politics, Black Lives Matter, yay. This unquestioning adherence to dogma. Some of the worst aspects of what I understand people like to call postmodern whatever. Like this whole... I guess a better way to put it is... I should maybe back up a bit and say one of the great... Like, I didn't come at this as some evolved, philosophical libertarian type. I was a social justice warrior on steroids, but my editor kind of imbued in me this profound sense of not impartiality, but earnestly listening to the other side. And I always made an effort to, because I had to hear what the other side said on an issue, like the homophobes, quote unquote. And in doing so, I gave them what I think was a fair hearing, and I was often told by some of the most egregiously anti-gay politicians and figures that I was the only one, for example, that quoted them correctly. We trust you. And I know that shouldn't make me feel good, but it did, that my detractors were my quote-unquote detractors. And
speaks to your integrity.
Thank you. And that felt good. That meant a lot to me. But what I also found was these people are often nice people, and the people on my side are often, I don't know, they have personality of shit, really. So I'm not naming names. But my point is that it's a real mindfuck. And what that led me to do is seriously always take the time to listen to views that don't necessarily align with my own preconceived worldview. I was always open to listening to other things, and when I saw a voice was being silenced, I really, really hated that. Like, I thought, and so I was turned on to, what was it? There's a men's rights organization called the Canadian Association for Equality. I was watching these YouTube videos of them being all shut down by social justice activists who were supposed to be aligned with what I stood for. And I think it was Janice Fiamenko. It was her talks that they shut down, and I just was incredibly impressed with her poise, dignity, the way she expressed what I think were some of the most important ideals of a free and democratic society. And just to see her shut down like that was really disturbing to me. And so that forced me, my instinct was to watch. Long story short, I watched a bunch of these videos and I got red-pilled, if that makes any sense to people. I'm woke.
It's funny, the social justice crowd would say you're the opposite of woke, but
oh no, they gave, like, you know, holy shit. No, I'll tell you one thing. I took a lot of abuse from people who align themselves with the social justice movement. Longtime friends, I was even like, you know, some very, very close friends of mine were no longer wanting to be friends with me, not because how I treated them. And, you know, to be honest, there's plenty of people who could dump me for how I treat them. I'm not always kind or polite or pleasant. But
that wasn't what they dumped you for.
No, they dumped me because I was going to some men's rights, quote-unquote, organization meetings, like Canadian Association for Equality. They put on these seminars and just public talks. Phil Johnson, he runs the local chapter here, he just does this largely on his own steam, and I was just incredibly impressed by what he brought forward. And I looked into it and I saw nothing wrong with it. I read their website, I read their pamphlets, I talked to people, and I thought, this is lovely. They're talking about men's issues. These are things I've been wanting to know about for my whole life, but I never had a father. My father was in a U.S. prison. He was a criminal from the States, and he died in prison in the U.S., and I never had a father figure.
You said you grew up in foster care?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
That was actually what my first article for Xtra was about coming out as gay in foster care.
Can you just go back a bit to how you ended up in foster care?
Oh, yeah. My mother was an abusive and negligent parent who was incapable of providing a stable and healthy home for us children.
And no father in the picture?
No father figure. Yeah, he's been deported before I was born even. And it was hard growing up because, you know, my mother's family, they always they always brought up reminders of who my father was in a bad way. And there wasn't like a lot of love in my home life growing up, and I am profoundly affected by that to the present day. And you can't really go back and undo some of that. I'm sure you can understand.
I was saying something like that to someone the other day when a conversation got started, always on social media, of course, about there's a new, how do I put it, narrative where addicts, like, it's all the system's fault, and like the addict doesn't even need to take responsibility for themselves. If the system will change, the addict will get clean. And I said something to the effect of, your uncle can't unfuck you. Right?
I'm sorry I'm laughing at
no,
that.
No, dude. This is a safe space.
I gotta use that one.
But right, you know what I mean when I say that. Like, if I'm all fucked up and I'm robbing people and I'm sticking dirty needles in my arms, it's some bad shit happened. I'm not going to say it to anyone who is in. There's mental health issues, there's trauma, there's attachment problems, there's marginalization. I'm the only one who can stop robbing people, though. There comes a point where I have to stand up and go, okay,
stop being a victim.
That's right.
Well, I don't say that to bash victims, because I think think this whole I don't believe we have to forgive people who've done us to heal. I read Toxic Parents by Susan Forward. That's my Bible. But I may not be responsible for some of the, my instincts or how I sometimes react, the crap from within and how it makes me act. But I am responsible for how it impacts other people. So
the minute for lack of a better term, but it is a good term, coping affects other people, then I'm responsible.
Yeah.
That's where I always draw. So if I'm jerking off 50 times a day and I'm still able to pay my bills and I'm still eating and I'm not having to hurt anyone, or I'm not having to borrow money to pay anyone back or anything like that, I'm not bothering anyone. It's fucking weird, but it's not affecting anyone. If I'm jerking off in public because I need to cope, then there's a problem.
Well, if you're jerking off 50 times a day, I hope to God that you were never subjected to genital mutilation, aka circumcision, because that's like peeling dry bark, I'm told. So I wouldn't know. When
did you get into foster care?
I think I was in and out, but 9. I was 9. Started? Yeah. It just got real bad. My mother got a boyfriend who was a heroin user.
Ooh.
Doing in intravenous drugs, and
sounds like a great guy.
Oh God, no, he was not. Yeah,
joke.
He was a logger, and he did the most dangerous form of logging, where you there's and Vancouver Island logging was sort of a big thing there, and I personally have a lot of respect for people who work in the forest industry and the industry in general. My grandfather, who made that desk there in the 60s. He died in 1970, but he was a logger, and I guess there was just something masculine and attractive about men who work in this dangerous field at that time, and I found him repulsive. He did heroin, and
hey man, not all of us heroin addicts are repulsive.
Oh, he was. And
those are my people you're talking about. Anyway, go on.
So that was just basically, it took that to really get the ministry involved and just, put the wheels on. It's interesting because a lot of the people who, came into my life at that time, teachers, they're still a part of my life today. Like some of these systems people, because a lot of people who are in your life when you're in that, you would know, are paid there to be for you, to be there with you. And they sometimes are some of the most significant people in your life. And you have this, I think, natural need to want to retain some connection to some of them throughout your life course and just say, hey, this is what I'm doing with my life, even if it's just a Facebook thing, right? So that's a bit something we learn to navigate.
When you say foster care, do you mean, and I know what you mean, but my listeners don't necessarily. What does foster care mean?
Well, here in British Columbia,
group homes and stuff?
It can, yeah. There's a lot more group homes now, I think, but I suppose I was born at a time when not as many people were in care, and I was very fortunate in that all my homes were just, family homes, and I would just live in, the social worker drives up and takes you to a house, and this is your new home. And it's actually a recurring dream I have to this day that I have to get ready to go to a new foster home. It's like...
Did you cycle through a whole bunch?
Not as many. I have a friend and she's been to over 30, I think 40. No, I think over the span of things I only had 5 by my count.
What kinds of things would cause you to have to leave and go to a new one?
Sometimes they were sick of me. Sometimes I was sick of them. Sometimes there was illness or death.
Any abuse, if you don't mind me asking?
Was there abuse in them? I'm trying to think. In the foster homes.
That's the thing you hear so much about.
You do, but I...
And I know not all foster parents do that shit.
No.
I think, in fact, most of them probably don't. Right?
No, there was one foster home where there was a lot of negligence and some really fucked up shit that went down. And I wrote about it in that article for Xtra. But no, never any abuse. I was very lucky that way. And they were light years ahead in terms of their parenting abilities than my home of origin. So, and again, I still talk to some of them.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And you aged out, hit 19.
No, I actually, when I was about 16, decided to go on an independent living contract. So I moved into my own apartment. And
you're an adult.
I'm an adult. Mm-hmm. And it's great. The thing is growing up, it was like I saw all these people fuck off and do drugs, pot, smoke, drink. And I just said, I associated that with those shitty outcomes. Here's the thing. Here's a narrative that's we don't often hear about in these stories is personal agency. I'm half American, so it kind of comes naturally to me to sort of look at it, I guess, from this angle. But statistically speaking, I should have ended up like a lot of the kids I grew up with, like in prison, or some of them are dead, following a life of crime.
Almost everyone I was ever in prison with grew up in foster care.
Oh, yeah.
It was actually rare. I was actually an oddball that I was never... no, I did eventually get put in care briefly for weird... It's a strange but this about you. But anyway,
no.
90% of the people I was ever locked up with were at some phase of the foster care system.
Yeah.
A lot of them never even met their parents.
Oh, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
So... fuck. What were we talking about?
Statistically, you should have ended up
right
in prison on the streets.
But I had a really bad time as a teenager. But I just said I want something better for myself. I don't know right now how. I dissociated as a form of a coping mechanism. I said, I'm not this. I'm something else. And I probably came off as completely insane to people, but as a coping mechanism, I dissociated and imagined I was this or that, the other thing. And eventually I would become that thing. And that was kind of neat. But the point is I made a conscious decision to not do alcohol, drugs, smoke, pot, whatever. Until my brain was finished growing. I didn't touch alcohol, pot, anything. And I have pot now, but very seldom. And I rarely drink.
I can tell you don't do pot very much because you said I have pot.
I do
I have pot sometimes now.
No, and if I have alcohol, they probably have alcohol.
And when I have alcohol.
Well, it just stays there for months. And I'm not a teetotaler. I mean, if you bust out the wine, I'll happily indulge. But my point is that this was a vision I had for myself. I said, I want to avoid this path. And I think... Because
you could see your peers going that route, I take.
Oh, and basically my family, I was not involved in anything uplifting, enabling, good. My family had no ambition for me whatsoever. No sports, no clubs, no instrument. I was never encouraged to do anything productive. And so me and my brother, we just, we did a lot of shoplifting and things like that. But then I hit a certain age when I just said, I don't want to follow this path. And that was it. And I look at the boys who did, and it's really sad to look at their profiles. You read about them in the newspaper. So I made a choice, and I don't know I can't go into other people's head and figure out where they were at, but I feel very fortunate that I was able to make that choice and stick to it. That I didn't end up like my father, in prison in the U.S. He was a lifetime criminal, man. I met him once when I was 21.
Did you have to go down there to visit him?
Oh, yeah. They said he's got a year left to live. And you should probably come down now if you want to ever meet your father. And so I took a Greyhound. I was studying university at that time at Trent in Peterborough, Ontario. And during a reading break, I took a Greyhound bus down to Michigan City, Indiana. And alone. Fucking... most surreal and fucked up experience of my life, going into a maximum security prison in the States, yelling at you. And, I'm kind of, I suppose I've got a bit of a fragile sensibility at that time, and I didn't like being yelled at by brash Americans. But then I quickly learned that you can deal with them by screaming back, and I'm like, hey, I got a loud voice too. Why don't I scream back? And it worked. Point is, I met my father. I get into this prison, and the doors all open and you see this emaciated man who looks like you if you had gone through hell and had a lot of tattoos and is much older. He was 40 when I was born. And that was a weird experience to meet this man. And I knew it was the first time I would ever meet him and the last. And it was just fucking weird, man.
How long was the visit?
About 4 hours, and there was a break in between.
So you met your father and interacted with him and talked to him, and
just like this.
Just like this, for 4 hours in your entire life.
Yeah, and
it's quite the thing to say.
Yeah, he'd had a lot. He'd his life. Like I found I'm a great researcher, and I found all of his records, etc. And his life, his childhood, was like a horror movie. It's as bad as you can imagine a childhood being, and he was basically he's one of these people who I don't think he even had it within him to make the choice. He was basically a crack baby. More than that, it just goes on and on his list of hindrances in life. And then he died of Lou Gehrig's disease in 2003. And that was very sad for his own life.
When you met him, through the course of your conversation, did he give any indication of how he felt about the relationship or lack thereof that you guys had?
No, well, he seemed really amused. Like, he didn't... For me, this was a very grave situation. I could just feel everything, see everything. It was just really heavy. I don't know that he necessarily shared with me the gravity of the situation and that I would never see him again. Like, I am your son and you've never seen me before and you're going to look at my face and lie to me. And I'm 21 years old at this time and I'm still very much a child with needs. I mean, now it would be so different. If I was to go down and meet him, I would do so as an adult, like a nurse almost, a social worker. I would just put on that hat. But at that time, I didn't have that armor. And it was, he was like telling me, like, solve your money problems by bashing a parking meter and stealing the money out of it. Just
almost like talking to a child, eh?
Oh, he was just, or one of his prison buddies. It was,
when you were talking to him, he was like the child.
Oh, yeah. And he just had and what was weird about him was he hadn't really been in society since the 70s. So all of the way he talked, if you ever watch these videos of old people in the 70s, how they talk, that's what it was like. And he always existed as someone, he lived very much in my mind as a dead person. So, like, everything about him was from the 70s, like old photos, old this, old that. And so meeting him was a lot like meeting a dead person. Like, that's the only thing I can describe it. Like, imagine someone who's dead and then having the ability to go and meet them in the flesh one more time. That's what it was like. It was fucking weird.
Thing I find most interesting about this story is Hollywood portrays these types of things as you get to meet your father that you've never met before one last time, and there's this reconciliation and forgiveness and, oh my God, son, I'm so sorry I treated you like this. And it's like, and I know that's fucking bullshit too, like, because I know guys like him, and the way he acted is exactly how I thought most guys would act. Like, you don't get into that situation. It's not like... The thing that a lot of people don't get about these kinds of things is something like this wouldn't be a moment of clarity for someone like him at all. It would, like you said, he was amused. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. This is because it's a novel experience. Hey, someone coming to visit me that I've never met before. It's not even really dawning on him emotionally that you're his son. You're just breaking up the time for the day.
Well, and I you ask these questions of people, you're asking your father questions that you would only ever get to ask him once. And so I wanted to know what he thought of ABBA. He said, oh, they're okay. And I said, what was your favorite song of theirs? I love ABBA. And he said, I don't even remember now. I think it was I Have a Dream, which is one of my least favorite of their songs.
Did you get up and storm out or not?
No, there was drama, of course. I mean, I'm dramatic. But no, the one thing that really hung with me is it's very rare for people to come from so far to visit their parent. And the lady, she was black and very fun and very nice. She said that most people don't even get visitors. Like, they never get to come. And so I'd come out of country. I have a funny accent to them. I don't have an accent. And I'm coming from university. Like, I'm sort of an unusual guest. And so everyone was kind of paying attention to us in the visitors room. If you've ever seen the prison show Oz, the visitor room scenes are very true to life. And that's what it looked and felt like.
Like, it's not through glass, it's at a table. Right?
They have the glass ones, but I got the table, and it's like a low table, so they can see. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to touch except when you leave and come. Anyway, beside us, there was this young man, probably about my age, and he had like a young face like me, and if he wasn't in his orange jumpsuit, he would not have looked out of place in my university, and it just kind of dawned on me I don't know what he did. He might have murdered babies. I don't know. But the point is I guess it really hammered home the brutality of the American prison system just to see someone who looked like it could be me. And anyway, he's sitting there and he's talking to his mom, who was dating another guy in the prison. That was fucking weird. But anyway.
That's not that uncommon.
Oh, it's fucked up.
Anyway, yeah.
And in my mind. But I guess you know where they are. Anyway, so this young man is definitely paying attention to what we're saying, not in a rude way. But at one point, my father was very upset that I wasn't addressing him as Dad. And I said, well, why would I call you Dad? You made a series of decisions that meant that you could never be in my life. And as a result, I can never call you Dad or view you in that regard. That position is vacant and it cannot be filled by you or anyone. That's my loss. And when I said that, that young man sitting across from me, I've never seen anyone's face. Like, it was intense. Like, it was like I'd thrown a dagger at his heart. And I don't know why, but perhaps he was empathetic for my
Just a strong likelihood that he came from a similar situation.
Yes, or he had
dad. Yeah.
He had children, yeah. And he's imagining in 20 years his son or daughter coming up and
having that conversation.
So when I saw his face go like that, I figured this young man is in here for a long time, and I wish I could find out who he was and have a conversation with him, but that's probably unlikely. But he was white and about my age, and that image will last with me the rest of my life.
The thing I find most surprising about that story is that a gay man likes ABBA. I'm shocked.
Well, they're happy, they're uplifting, they're melodic.
Oh, no, I get it.
And you would be surprised at some of the ABBA stuff that I have here. But we don't want to talk about ABBA.
No, I'm fucking with you. Of course a gay dude likes ABBA.
Oh, yeah. And musicals.
So, okay. So you leave... You're in foster care. Mm. You independent living. You get into school. Mm-hmm. You start... We've kind of covered, like... Where are you now? What's going on now?
Oh,
so you're taking this legal...
Yeah, well, actually, this has been the most transformative and positive year of my life. I feel like a spell has been broken. I don't want to say my life has been bad, but it has been a grind, and I haven't felt that my efforts to them have paid off a lot. Like, all my work in journalism, like, I don't mean to be dramatic or bitchy about it, but I just think, who cares, right? But this year has been, like, because I was never able to really secure a living wage out of what I did. And the nature of the industry, it's harder and harder to find those sorts of jobs. And my desire to do so has significantly lessened. So one of the outstanding issues from my childhood was my orthodontic care. If you ever saw me 2-3 years ago, I had these horrible gaps in my teeth, a giant overbite. And I felt just that I needed to get that fixed. For me, it was always like I'd look in the mirror and it was a reminder that I didn't have parents or the stability or anyone.
You're not normal and you weren't normal.
Yeah, like, for example, I had cousins that had braces because their parents were middle class. And again, it was just it was a constant reminder of that I was basically not loved by the people who were supposed to love and care for me because my orthodontic issues were major. And they were the first thing anyone would notice about me. I had like a 9mm gap in the middle of my teeth, a prominent crooked O. Anyway,
That could have been your rapper name. 9mm Gap.
Actually, that's not bad. Yeah. I think I'd go with N-word. I like that. Just N-word, not the pejorative. But anyway. So the point is that was like an outstanding issue that I had to deal with, but getting it paid for, I don't have that kind of money, so I managed to get the ministry to pay for it, and I could tell anyone in private how I did it, but I'd rather not go into the nitty-gritty details except to say that I had documents from my childhood. Again, I'm very good at keeping records and finding information, freedom of information requests. I had all the documents about when I was supposed to get those braces, and I basically put the screws on the right government officials and said, hey, yo. So I got braces in 2014, I think, and in January 2017, I actually had my jaw surgery. They cut my jaw in half, and Dr. Mark Reichman did that. He's one of the best in Canada. And it was the first time I'd ever had an incision in my body. First time any surgery, and it felt something in me changed. It was
like a psychosomatic
effect. Profound. It was almost like I woke up as a new... I know it sounds over dramatic,
I get it.
But all my body chemistry had changed apparently because they put all these fluids and drugs and morphine and stuff, and so
nice.
But I felt this inner peace, this wow, something has changed, something clicks, something's going right, and I feel that this is the beginning of something very, very good for my future. And what it is you look in the mirror, you feel your face, you feel your skull, and it feels different. It feels more symmetrical. It's easier to eat. It's easier to talk. You look different. And I thought my doctors were like, oh, it's just the fluids and your body chemistry changing. But a year on, I still feel it. It hasn't left me this. And one of the changes was when I woke up, it was like, I'm done journalism. I filed my last story that January, just before my surgery, and I had to take time off because I couldn't talk, which is good for everyone, I think. And I just never went back. It wasn't like I quit, I'm done, but a year later, I can't go back. I'm not interested in it anymore. My life has moved on, and what I'm doing now is I did a lot of research over the last 6 years of what I should transition to in terms of my career, and law seemed like a very likely channel to go into. But I don't want to be a lawyer, frankly. I don't want to work that hard. I know that sounds lazy, but it is what it is.
I get it, man.
I don't want to go to school for 3 years and do that grind. Half my friends are lawyers, and one of my good friends, he's a very good lawyer and someone who I respect immensely, and he said, why don't you be a legal assistant? And I took his advice and ran with it, and the ministry paid for my schooling, and I'm doing a 1-year program at Douglas College to be a legal administrative assistant.
You hear that, listeners? Just go into foster care if you want to get your education paid for.
Well, that's not the channel I used to get that one paid for, but I did get that paid for. Basically, anyway.
I'm just fucking around anyway.
I have other education too. Like I have a degree, I've got a certificate in journalism, and but I need to have a skill that's so useful to other people that they're willing to pay me to do it. And the man isn't going to pay you to do your critical feminist dance theory papers or whatever. I did a degree in Canadian studies, which is great and interesting, but not necessarily great to find a job. And journalism, as I said, it's a career that seems to be in terminal decline. So I said, what can I do that's useful to others and they'll pay me, and I don't have to go out in the frickin' oil rig or whatever. And massive respect, by the way, to those who do that work. It's extremely dangerous, and I have childhood friends who are doing it. And but I chose instead to stick to the clerical stuff, and it pays a lot more than what I would have made as a journalist. I'll have a living wage, hopefully, more flexibility, room for growth, and I'll work for a lawyer, basically, as their assistant, doing their paperwork and so forth. And I hope someone will hire me. So if you're a lawyer and you want a 36-year-old gay Canadian monarchist to work for you, I'll do work.
Yeah. So one thing I guess I'd like, we touched on it a little bit, but it's interesting to me to maybe expand upon is as having come out the other side of journalism, and what do you see? How do you see it all going now? Like, because I just see, I don't watch too much TV or anything anymore or all that, but all I see is it's like Trump, 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 and like everything's like they're trying to they're sensationalizing everything even more than they used to, and it's like it's trying to keep us on the verge of like anxiety and panic all the time. Well, were you there for that transition?
Oh yeah. And
it's to keep us wired to it. To keep you can see it. It's like an addictive thing. It's to keep you glued to the screen.
Yeah, like there was a Toronto editor. He actually took out quotes because they were critical of Black Lives Matter Toronto, and that was something that he was very supportive of. And I'd never up to that point had an editor basically take out content for that reason, and at that point I was like, there's no going back, I have to get out of this. So I guess that would be the moment with Matthew Demera, his name was. Anyway, libel lawsuit. Hopefully not, but
yeah.
Oh fuck, I hope you can take that one out. But
I can.
Please do.
Just take his name out? Alright, where are we at? We're at 5 minutes, and I'll just take this part out. 5 minutes and about 50. Okay.
Anyway, the point is what were we talking about?
The
transition.
The evolution or de-evolution of media and how it's turned into this kind of sensationalized, etc.
What I did was I wrote the news, I reported it, and I'd made an earnest attempt. I have my own opinions, I'm very opinionated, but I did my best to present what people had to say on an issue and get the information as good as it could be. I would try to inform readers and respect their intelligence enough to make their own conclusions on what it all meant. But what we're seeing more and more is you look on Facebook feed and you look what people are sharing. 9 times out of 10, it's not news. You're not getting expository, informative news. You are getting someone's opinion. I call it link hygiene. Like something, I think I invented that term. Like people who will share these really clickbait stories from shitty websites like Daily Hive, aka Van City Buzz. Just that promotional content mill garbage. For example, never click an article that has this, these, or them in the headline. That's a little... or you'll. So we're hearing a lot more in terms of perspectives, opinions, and like you say, like everyone who has an asshole else has an opinion, and that's not, to me, very valuable. And like you say, it's driving up anxieties, and we're going back to, I think, a form of journalism that was more popular in like the 1800s, where it was really sensationalized. And I don't call it journalism. Like HuffPost, that's not journalism. Fuck HuffPost.
Yeah.
It's not a political thing either.
No, that's not the first complaint I've ever heard about them.
And fuck Van City Buzz / Daily Hive. You are destroying what was once a very good profession.
So there. Well, I've enjoyed talking to you. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I ask this of all my guests.
Sure.
To the average person, which is basically my listeners, just average people, do you have anything you'd like them to say? Any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like them to know?
Well, I want to thank them for listening to me, and if they want to get in touch with me and have a conversation about any subject, you can find me through Facebook. I'm Nathaniel Christopher. I have a website, nathaniel.ca. And my email is nathanielchristopher@gmail.com.
Well, thanks, Nathaniel.
Take care.
Okay.
That was good. Thank you.